It's really good to see all of you this evening. I hope you've had a good afternoon. If you feel like I do, the Sunday afternoons are pretty short. But we're glad to be back here this evening and able to worship God in song and prayer and to study His Word. And I hope you have a very good week. And remember the men's meeting tomorrow evening at 7, and then Wednesday evening singing, and then Friday evening the area-wide singing. So let's all try to participate in those activities. We read in the New Testament, in the book of Matthew and in the book of Mark, we read about the time when Jesus went up on a mountain, and He took with Him Peter, James, and John. And while there on that mountain He was transfigured. His countenance was changed. And there appeared to them Moses and Elijah. And Peter was so enthralled and overcome by that occasion that he said, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. Let's build here 3 tabernacles. One for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was trying to put them all on the same level, but that may have sounded good to him, but it did not sound good to God. Because God spoke from heaven and said, "This, Jesus, is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." You hear Him. Listen to Him now. There was a time when you listened to Moses and the prophets, but now you listen to Jesus. And that had to be a wonderful occasion. And in fact, Peter wrote about that in the book of 2 Peter, about that journey up there to the Mount of Transfiguration. And I know that he enjoyed it. And I've got an idea that if Peter had had his way, he would have just stayed up there on the mountain. But they couldn't stay on the mountain because there was work to be done down in the valley. And so they went down from the mountain and they found all of these people who were sick and needed to be healed. And the Lord went about His work. We could say that Peter had a mountaintop experience. And we've all had those mountaintop experiences. I don't mean in the same way that Peter did. But we've had some very exciting times. You remember he was on the mountaintop and then he went down into the valley. And we can't spend all of our time on the mountaintop because there's work down in the valley. Life is a series of peaks and valleys. It's a series of ups and downs. Life changes. And we can be on the clouds one day, and not long after that, we can be down in the valley. When I think about that, I think about Elijah of the Old Testament. Elijah was a prophet of God, a man of God, a strong man. In fact, sometimes people confuse John the Baptist and Elijah. Not that they lived at the same time. They lived hundreds of years apart. But they were alike in some ways. And when John came onto the scene, people thought that it was Elijah reenacted. But Elijah was a great man. He was a courageous man. And the Israelites had turned away from God and turned into idols. And Elijah said to them, "When are you going to make up your mind who you're going to serve?" And he challenged them. There were 450 prophets of Baal, a false god, Baal. And he challenged them to a contest. He said, "We're going to go up on a mountain, and you prepare your sacrifice, lay it on the altar, and then call upon your God to set it afire. Send fire from heaven to burn it." And then he said, "I'm going to build my altar and put the sacrifice upon it, First put the wood on it, then the sacrifice. And then I'll call upon my God, the true God of heaven. And whichever one of these gods sends down fire, that's who we're going to serve. And so those prophets of Baal, 450 of them, they fixed their altar up, put the wood on it, put the sacrifice on it. And then they began to cry unto Baal, Baal, send down fire from heaven to burn this sacrifice. Nothing happened. Elijah chided them a little bit. He said, you got to yell a little louder. Maybe he's asleep and you need to wake him up. And so they cried louder. He said, well, maybe he's gone to a far country and he just can't hear you. Actually, what he was doing was poking fun at them, which they really needed. And they even cut themselves, thinking that would help for their God to send down the fire. But nothing hit. Nothing happened. Then it was Elijah's turn. He built that altar, put the wood on it, put his bullock upon it, and then he just very quietly and reverently prayed to God that he would send down fire from heaven and consume that sacrifice. First, though, he had a ditch dug around that altar, and he had water poured on the wood, the sacrifice, and it even filled up the ditch. And he called upon God. Send down fire from heaven to consume this sacrifice. And immediately the fire came down, consumed the sacrifice, the wood, and even the altar, and licked up the water that was in that ditch. And then the 450 prophets of Baal were slain. And word of this came to Jezebel. She was the wicked queen, the queen of King Ahab. And she sent word to Elijah that she was going to kill him, and very soon. Well, Elijah kind of acted out of character for him. This courageous man fled. He went into the wilderness and he sat down under a juniper tree. And he prayed to God. He said, God, I'm the only one left that serves you. Just go ahead and take my life. No more reason for me to live. Just take my life now. But God did not do that. Elijah went to sleep, and an angel provided some food and water for him. But the point I want to make is this. Elijah, normally a man up and going and doing great things for the Lord, had a case of the blues. He was feeling sorry for himself. He was having a pity party for himself. And you know, I imagine everybody here has been in that state at one time or the other. If there's anybody here who's never had a case of the blues, just raise your hand. I will see you. I've had them. I'll have to add, I've had a lot more mountaintop experiences than I have cases of the blues. But it's not unusual for people to be under the juniper tree. And you know, thinking everything is going to go bad and nothing is going to turn out right. Now, what are we going to do when we have times like that? First, I want to share with you something that I found about a person who had a pretty bad case of the blues. Nobody likes me at school, said the son to his mother. The teachers don't, the kids don't. Superintendent wants to transfer me. The bus drivers hate me. The school board wants to wants me to drop out. The custodians have it in for me. Mother, I just can't face another day. I don't want to go to school. But son, the mother insisted, you're healthy. You got a lot to learn. You must adjust to coping with life. Besides, you've got something to offer to others. Why, you're a leader. And after all, you're 49 years old. And you are the principal. Honey, you just got to go to school. Well, that may be a little extreme. But maybe we felt that way. Just don't want to do anything. Just want to sit and mope. Well, what are we going to do in a case like that? Well, first of all, I would suggest that we understand and realize that this crisis is going to be over. Things are going to change. And you won't be under that juniper tree. You may think it'll never end, but it will. All this reminds me when I was a kid at home. Now, my dad's, as I've told you before, his main occupation was moving houses. And I may have also told you I got my call to preach in an old dirty house. Now, forget that. But in addition to moving houses, at one point, he leased a farm. I think it was 180 acres. And about 100 acres of it was beside a creek. And and it was long rows. I believe that field was about a mile long. And one spring he decided to put that in corn. And that corn grew and did very well. But my dad was kind of a different type. The neighbors could always get by with just plowing out the middles. You know, they'd take a single tree or double tree and plow out the middles. But my dad thought that we ought not only to plow out the middles, plow out those rows, but take our hoe and chop between each stalk and get the grass that single tree did not, single shovel did not get. And I'd go down one of those rows and I thought this row would never end. Does this row, will it ever have an end to it? But they always did. I used that illustration one time in Missouri. And a fellow took that incident and he wrote this poem. The rows of corn seemed miles long, and the hoe grew heavier each stroke. My back would ache like it would break, and the dust caused me to choke. The weeds grew rank and hard to chop. There seemed more weeds than grain, and the sun shone down so awful hot, I feared it would cook my brain. But there was a place to rest in the shade at the end of the longest row. And then at night the sun went down, and I could lay down my hoe. No matter how long or hard the task, nor how many hours we may spend, no matter how long or weedy the row, at last it must come to an end. The longest night must have an end. And after the night comes the dawn. The worst kind of trouble comes to pass. It comes, it passes, and it's gone. So whatever it is that may have put you under the juniper tree, whatever it is that may cause you to have that case of the blues, just remember, it will change. There will be an end to it. Did you ever notice how many times in the New Testament and the Old Testament too, that we find the expression, and it came to pass? Everything eventually comes to pass. So just hang on. Now, sometimes those cases of the blues might be because of a long period of illness. I've known people who have been sick for a long time, and then they recover. Or it could be that case of the blues is brought about by the death of a loved one, especially a spouse. And several of you here tonight can testify that can be a very sad time. But things get better. It doesn't remain that way. And so let us remember. And we also need to remember to pray to God for strength. We talked about prayer this morning. And I'm not bragging or boasting or anything like that, but I can't tell you how many times a day I pray. You know, a prayer doesn't have to be very long. Prayer could just be a few words. And we find ourselves in some sad situation, and the best thing we can do is pray to God for strength and wisdom to help us out of that situation. And then we need to remember that even this period, this case of the blues, some good can come out of it. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. And then a few other things I'd like to notice with you. Just remember that whatever your situation is, things could be a whole lot worse.
Amen. That's right.
Is your car like mine getting old? I drive a 22-year-old car. People say, well, why don't you trade car? Why don't you buy a new car? I said, I bet you that the car I'm driving has fewer miles than the one you're driving. And generally that's the case. But you know, cars can get pretty old and need a lot of attention. And it can be serious enough that it gives some people a case of the blues. Or maybe the house that you're living in is not as large or as nice as you would like for your house to be. But just remember, a lot of people would love to have your house. Maybe they're living in a shack somewhere beside the railroad. Things could be a whole lot worse. And your health. Maybe your health is not as good as you'd like for it to be. But there's always somebody in worse health than we are. A good many years ago, I held a gospel meeting at Hugo, Oklahoma. And there's a little town next to Hugo, although Hugo's a pretty little town itself. But there's a little town there named Boswell, Oklahoma. One day, a brother took me over to Boswell to visit a lady. And this lady lived in an iron lung. Do they still use iron lungs? I never see an iron lung anymore. But I think maybe had polio, whatever it was, she lived in an iron lung. She could only be out a couple of hours a day. And I thought, now this is going to be a drag. We didn't cheer her up. She cheered us up. She was just that kind of a person. And I thought, sometime when I grumble and complain about the way I feel, there's always somebody worse than I. And one way that she cheered us up. Now, she was paralyzed. Couldn't move a hand or feet or anything. But she was also a painter, not the one I talked about this morning. She was a painter. She painted beautiful pictures. Well, how could she paint if she couldn't move her hands or her feet? Put the brush in her mouth and painted beautiful pictures. In fact, we have one of her pictures. It's just a small little thing. on one of our tables there in our living room. And every time I look at it, I'm reminded of that lady. And I'm reminded how thankful I ought to be that God has blessed me with good health. And so when you're feeling sorry for yourself about the way you're feeling, just remember there's some people in lots worse shape. You know, we used to say, I used to complain because my shoes hurt my feet. Until today I saw a fellow who had no feet. And so, to put it another way, we just need to count our blessings. And then I'd suggest too that we stay busily engaged in profitable things. Let's go back to Elijah for a moment. Now, Elijah was generally up and going strong and working and doing things for the Lord and preaching for the people to repent. But what did he do now? He sat down under the juniper tree. And then is when he got to feeling so sorry for himself. Lord, just let me die. I'm no good anymore. I don't have any reason to live anymore. That was not his language when he was up and blowing and going, but when he stopped doing things. And you know, I can identify with that. The last 4 months for me, they have been very different. I can remember a time when I'd just go blow and go all day, either with physical labor or doing something for the church. And I've got to get out of this, but I don't go anywhere much anymore. Some days the farthest away from home I get is to the mailbox. And that's not a good way to be. Someday you call me and say, hey, I got a wood pile that needs to be moved. Come out and help me move this wood pile. Or I've got a job that I need for you to do. But it's not a good idea just to sit down and mope. We need to stay busily engaged in something good and help somebody and get our mind off ourselves. Forget our woes and go about doing good. And then when we're under that juniper tree, it's not a good time to make heavy, weighty decisions. I've seen this happen a lot of times. A lady, her husband would die. She left all alone. What am I going to do with this house? I'm going to sell this house. And I'm going to move to some other town. And she does. And you know, it's just in a little while she said, oh, I wish I had my house back. I wish I lived back there in my old town again. Somebody said a person is no more at himself when he is distressed and blue than when he is drunk. I don't know if I agree with that or not. But still, we don't make our best decisions when we are feeling down and out. And, you know, I doubt that Elijah would have asked the Lord to take his life if he hadn't been so blue as he was. And, you know, it's no time to panic. Just be patient. Give it time. And the other group of people that I've seen practice that principle, believe it or not, is preachers. You know, things might not go as well as he would like in a congregation. And the attendance is not growing every Sunday. and people not always patting him on the back. And he said the thing to do is just to find a new location. Just move. Get a new job. Or quit preaching altogether. And I've seen that happen. And then after they would move, it wouldn't be 6 weeks till they'd say, "Oh, I'd give anything to be back at my own place." I know things got slow there, but I made a hasty decision when I was not thinking my best. And so we need to avoid making those decisions on the spur of the moment like that. And then it's a good time to let our friends help. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, "If I can help you in a way, well, be sure to let me know." And they were sincere. And I've let some of them know. I remember last February during our bad cold spell, our electricity would be off about 5 hours, and then be on about 5 hours. And that house got terribly cold. And fortunately, I had a fireplace, and I kept that fireplace going till I ran out of wood up at the house. And then we have a neighbor that lives across the field. Remember Brother Giles? I believe Brother Giles' grandson. I've kind of known him in the past, but not real well. But late one evening about dark, he and his wife came chugging up on a four-wheeler. And they said, "We just came over to see if you're doing all right. And to see if there's any way we can help you, anything you need." Well, I thought, I'm just going to put that guy to a test. I said, "You see that wood pile out there in the pasture? My wood box here on the patio is empty. Would you take that four-wheeler out there and bring me a load of wood back?" "Well, sure, we'd be glad to." And you know, that meant an awful lot, just letting somebody help. We remember reading in the book of Acts about Paul. He was on his way to Rome. He knew he was on his way to Rome to die. And he had never been to Rome before. But there was a congregation in Rome. He had written them a letter. And so after he got off the ship and headed by way of land to Rome, there was the Appian Way. He was traveling the Appian Way. And the brethren there heard that Paul was coming. And so they sent a group out to meet Paul. And the Bible says that he saw them and he took courage. You know, we can be encouraged by the presence of our friends and neighbors. And it's a good time to let somebody help. It would have been a good thing if somebody had come by Elijah's juniper tree and said, "Cheer up, Elijah. We're here to help you." Well, the one came, but it was an angel. But how great it would be if we would show up when we know that people are having a hard time. And they don't have to tell us. We can generally observe that by their appearance or by their actions. So when you find yourself under a juniper tree, remember these things, and we're gonna make it all right. Well, that's my lesson for this evening. I'm sure you would have some suggestions that could be added to this list. But I hope you have a lot of mountaintop experiences. I hope you're on the mountain more than you're in the valley. But when you get down in the valley, Just remember, things are going to change, and generally they change for the better. And so let's quit sobbing. Quit feeling sorry for ourselves. Quit having that pity party. And things are going to be all right. I know that the time in which we live, with all that's going on, and I believe mention was made of that earlier today, with all that's going on, this pandemic thing, the way our nation is headed, it's enough to make a person blue and discouraged. Elijah, we've been talking about you. Is that Elijah?
Ben.
Oh, okay. I was mistaken there. But you do have an Elijah, don't you? Yeah. Okay. But as I was saying, there are plenty of things going on today. I think I'd be better off if I just wouldn't listen to the news. Because about all it does is upset me. And whether I know it or not is not going to change the world situation. But there's plenty today. You know, we talk about people's houses being taken back by, they can't make their payments. What's the word I'm trying to think? What now? Repossessed, yeah. There's another word, but that's the idea. A lot of people, pardon me?
Foreclosed.
Foreclosure, that's the idea, yeah. A lot of people can't pay their rent. They don't know where they're going to move. But things will get better. I believe it. Things will get better. So, you believe that too, and we're all going to be all right. Anybody here needs to come to the Savior tonight? Do you have that opportunity? Let's stand and sing.